A federal judge just told the U.S. government, no, in open court, on the record, with Lil Durk's wife sitting right there watching it happen. Durk Banks was staring down a murder-for-hire trial that prosecutors had just tried to turn into a full-blown racketeering case, dumping 2 additional alleged killings into the mix weeks before jury selection. The judge didn't just push back on it. He accused the government, to their face, of trying to make the Chicago tail wag the Los Angeles dog. That's not a rap lyric. That's a sitting United States District Judge, Michael W. Fitzgerald, cutting off a federal prosecutor mid-argument in a downtown Los Angeles courtroom this week. Lil Durk has been locked up since October 2024, fighting a murder-for-hire case that accuses him of orchestrating the killing of Xavier Robinson, the cousin of his rap rival Quando Rondo, in an alleged act of revenge for the 2020 death of his friend and protege, King Von. That case alone carries a possible life sentence. But just weeks before trial, prosecutors dropped a third superseding indictment, suddenly accusing Durk of running a criminal enterprise and trying to pull in a completely separate 2022 Chicago killing and a 2019 Atlanta shooting into the same trial. Durk's lawyers called it lipstick on a pig. And this week, a federal judge basically agreed, ruling those new racketeering charges will not be part of the trial that starts August 20th. They'll be tried separately, later, on their own. This is a real, documented win in one of the most closely watched criminal cases in hip-hop right now. And the way it went down in that courtroom is wild. To understand why this week's ruling is such a big deal, you have to go back to what Lil Durk is actually facing, because this isn't a minor charge. This is a federal murder-for-hire case that carries the possibility of life in prison. Federal prosecutors allege that Durk Banks, that's his real name, orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot targeting Tiquian Terrell Bowman, the rapper known as Quando Rondo, as an act of retaliation. The backstory prosecutors point to is the 2020 shooting death of Davon Bennett, known to the world as King Von, a close friend and protege of Durk's. Prosecutors allege Durk blamed Quando Rondo for that death, and that in response, he arranged for a group of alleged hitmen to travel to Los Angeles and carry out what's described in court filings as an execution-style shooting in broad daylight on August 19, 2022. The target, according to the indictment, was Quando Rondo himself. But the person who was actually killed that day was Xavier Robinson, Quando's cousin, who died in the shooting. Prosecutors allege Durk used coded language to communicate with the men accused of carrying out the killing, a claim Durk denies entirely. He has pleaded not guilty to every charge against him in this case. Durk has been in federal custody since October 24, 2024, and according to his legal team, that detention has included nearly 5 months in segregated housing. This is a man who has been sitting in custody for close to 2 years, waiting for his day in court, all while facing a charge that could put him away for life. Here's the part that makes this story explosive. This case has already been delayed multiple times. According to court filings, the trial has been pushed back from an original January 2025 date to October 2025, then to January 2026, then April 2026, and finally to the current August 20th, 2026 date. And according to Durk's legal team, he objected to nearly every single one of those delays. He's the one who's reportedly been demanding a faster trial the entire time, not the side dragging its feet. So picture where things stood heading into this summer. Nearly 2 years of federal prosecutors building a case specifically around the August 2022 Los Angeles shooting. Nearly 2 years of Durk sitting in custody, pushing for his trial date, watching it get postponed again and again despite his objections. And then, just weeks before the trial was finally set to begin, everything changed. On June 3, 2026, a grand jury returned a third superseding indictment against Durk. This wasn't a minor tweak to existing charges. This indictment fundamentally transformed the case. It added brand new racketeering counts, accusing Durk of being the leader of what prosecutors labeled the Banks Gang enterprise. Language straight out of a RICO prosecution playbook, the kind typically used against organized crime networks, not the kind you'd expect added to a case 2 months before trial. The new indictment didn't just add a label. It pulled in entirely new alleged incidents that had never been part of the original Los Angeles case at all. A January 27, 2022 killing in Chicago, and a 2019 shooting in Atlanta. Suddenly, a case that had been narrowly focused on one 2022 shooting in Los Angeles for nearly 2 straight years had ballooned into a sprawling, multi-state racketeering prosecution, with new evidence, new alleged victims, and new legal theories, all introduced roughly 10 weeks before a trial date that had already been fought over and delayed 4 separate times. That's the trigger. And it's exactly what set off the legal fight that would come to a head this week. The moment that third superseding indictment landed, Durk's legal team didn't hold back. This is a stacked defense roster. By the way, attorneys Drew Findling, Christy O'Connor, Marissa Goldberg, and Brian Steele, the same Brian Steele who represented Young Thug during the YSL RICO trial. These are lawyers who know exactly what a racketeering prosecution looks like from the inside, and they came out swinging. In a statement shared with Rolling Stone the same day the new indictment was announced, Durk's lawyers didn't mince words. "This indictment is lipstick on a pig," they said, arguing that federal prosecutors had spent nearly 2 years failing to make their original case stick, and that this new racketeering pivot was a desperate, last-minute move to shore up what they called a weak prosecution. They went further, calling it not a sign of strength, but an acknowledgement of weakness, and insisting that no matter how many new indictments the government threw at their client, Durk Banks remained innocent. That was the public statement. But the real fight was happening in the paperwork. On June 26, Durk's legal team filed a formal motion asking the court to do one of 2 things. Either sever the new racketeering counts from the upcoming trial entirely, letting the original Los Angeles murder-for-hire case proceed on schedule, or, if the judge wouldn't allow that, dismiss the newest indictment altogether. A redacted version of that motion became public on June 30th, and it laid out exactly why the timing mattered so much. According to the filing, if the new racketeering counts weren't separated from the trial, the sheer volume of new evidence tied to them would force another lengthy delay, something Durk's team argued would violate his constitutional right to a speedy trial. The motion didn't hold back on the legal language either, arguing directly that the last-minute addition of what are called Vicar counts, violent crimes in aid of racketeering, put Durk's constitutionally guaranteed right to a prompt trial in real jeopardy, and that the court should sever those counts to let him finally get the trial he'd been demanding. The defense also took direct aim at the government's timing. According to the motion, prosecutors had access to most, if not all, of the evidence supporting these new racketeering counts months before they actually filed the new indictment. If that evidence had been sitting there for months, the defense argued, there was no legitimate reason to introduce it just 10 weeks before trial, unless the goal was to force exactly the kind of delay Durk had been fighting against from day one. The numbers involved were staggering. According to the motion, one single discovery production tied to the new charges required a full 1 terabyte hard drive to transfer, on top of additional cell phone extractions and evidence spanning both the Chicago and Atlanta allegations. Durk's team argued that being handed that volume of new material just 2 months before a trial carrying a potential life sentence was, in their words, untenable, that no defense team could reasonably review, digest, investigate, and prepare to rebut terabytes of new data on that kind of timeline. There was also a separate, ongoing fight buried in all of this about what evidence prosecutors could use at trial in the first place. Specifically how much of Durk's own music prosecutors wanted to introduce as evidence. According to reporting, prosecutors had repeatedly amended their notices about which songs and videos they intended to use, and by June 2026 were seeking to introduce excerpts from several additional tracks that hadn't previously been part of the case, some identified for the first time only weeks before trial. For a defense team already drowning in a terabyte of new discovery, having to also reassess months of preparation around expanding lyric evidence added yet another layer of pressure. Prosecutors weren't backing down though. In a filing responding to Durk's motion, the government stated plainly that they remain prepared to proceed to trial on August 20, 2026, regardless of the dispute. They also pointed to a separate case entirely to bolster their argument for keeping the Chicago allegations in play, the murder of a man named Stefan Mack. According to reporting, 2 men had already pleaded guilty in separate federal cases tied to Mack's killing, and both admitted, as part of their plea, that they had tried to collect a bounty for his death from Durk. Prosecutors say that evidence, including a text message describing the men waiting for Durk to return to Chicago, and a recorded confession from behind bars, wouldn't have been available to introduce until those guilty pleas were secured, which is part of why it surfaced only recently. Prosecutors also pointed to something else in their filings, an alleged text message from Durk himself, reportedly telling people to delete thread and start new one, amid concerns about a police investigation. The government has framed that message as evidence of an attempt to conceal information relevant to the case. So now you had 2 sides dug in hard. Durk's team arguing this was a last-minute, evidence-dumping tactic designed to force delay after delay. The government arguing the new evidence only became available when it did, and that they were fully ready to go to trial as scheduled either way. Both sides asked the court to settle it. A hearing was set for July 27, but things moved even faster than that. Here's where we get into what's fully confirmed, on the record, from inside an actual federal courtroom this week. On Tuesday, Judge Michael W. Fitzgerald held a hearing, and it did not go the way federal prosecutors wanted. According to reporting from inside the courtroom, the hearing ran roughly 40 minutes, and Durk's wife, India Royale, was present in the courtroom to watch it unfold. During the hearing, Judge Fitzgerald pressed prosecutors directly, asking why they had waited so long to file charges related to the January 27, 2022 killing in Chicago, a killing prosecutors described as involving an alleged rival gang member. Durk was never actually charged in connection with that Chicago killing itself. Instead, prosecutors alleged that afterward, Durk brought $1 million in cash to a music studio as what they characterized as a monetary reward, and that an alleged co-conspirator later posted a photo on social media showing off that reward. A post prosecutors say referenced lyrics from one of Durk's own songs. Judge Fitzgerald wanted to know why, if prosecutors felt this evidence was so central to the case, they hadn't pushed to get a ruling much earlier on whether the Chicago incident should simply be introduced as evidence within the existing Los Angeles murder-for-hire trial, rather than waiting until weeks before trial to file an entirely new racketeering indictment built around it. In his ruling, delivered after that tense back and forth, Judge Fitzgerald sided with the defense. He ordered that the newly added racketeering charges, the ones tied to the alleged 2022 Chicago killing and the alleged 2019 Atlanta shooting, will be severed from the August 20th trial entirely. Those charges will instead be tried separately, in a subsequent trial, with no date yet set for when that second trial will happen. The judge didn't hold back in explaining his reasoning either. He described the government's third superseding indictment in blunt terms, saying it amounted to, in his words, a very clever attempt at having the Chicago allegations wag the Los Angeles case, essentially accusing prosecutors of trying to use the newer, separate allegations to influence and strengthen a case that was originally supposed to stand on its own evidence from the 2022 Los Angeles shooting. He went further, directly confronting what he suggested was the government's real motivation. He suggested it sounded like prosecutors believed they'd have a stronger chance of winning if the Chicago allegations were tried together with the Los Angeles case, rather than separately. Where the government seemed to view the combination as an advantage, the judge made clear he viewed it as exactly the kind of unfairness he was there to prevent, stating plainly that his job was to make sure both sides received a fair trial. Also confirmed from the ruling, prosecutors reportedly told the court they would withdraw evidence of the Chicago incident specifically from the Los Angeles trial, effectively conceding the piece to the judge's ruling. One more confirmed detail from the same hearing, prosecutors indicated they would formally ask the court to grant anonymity to the 16 jurors selected for the August 20th trial, citing security concerns. Judge Fitzgerald indicated the court would address the specific procedure for handling juror anonymity at a follow-up hearing. Following the ruling, Durk's attorney Drew Findling spoke directly to reporters, and his statement was about as clear a declaration of victory as you'll get from a defense lawyer. "We are very happy with the court's order," Findling said. He went on to describe 21 months of unwavering commitment to Durk and to his innocence, and said the defense team was looking forward to the August 20th trial finally moving forward as planned. To be clear about what this ruling does and doesn't mean, it is not a dismissal of the racketeering charges. Those charges still exist. Durk still faces them. They will simply be tried in a completely separate proceeding, at a later date that hasn't been set yet. What this ruling accomplishes is keeping the original, nearly 2-year-old Los Angeles murder for hire case intact and moving forward on its original August 20th trial date, without the added weight, evidence, and complexity of the newer racketeering allegations dragging it into further delay. To fully understand why this ruling matters, you need the wider arc of how Lil Durk ended up facing a potential life sentence in the first place. The roots of this case trace back to one of the most devastating losses of Durk's career, the 2020 shooting death of Davon Bennett, the rapper known as King Von, who was not just a label mate but a close friend and protege Durk had helped bring into the industry. Prosecutors alleged that Durk came to blame Quando Rondo, born Tiquian Terrell Bowman, for King Von's death, and that this alleged grudge became the motive behind the Los Angeles case now heading to trial. According to the federal indictment, Durk allegedly arranged for a group of men to travel to Los Angeles specifically to carry out a killing targeting Quando Rondo. On August 19, 2022, a shooting occurred in broad daylight. But the person killed in that shooting wasn't Quando Rondo. It was Xavier Robinson, Quando's cousin, an outcome prosecutors described as the tragic result of the alleged plot going wrong in terms of who it ultimately claimed. Durk was arrested and taken into federal custody on October 24, 2024, more than 2 years after the shooting itself, reflecting how long an investigation of this scale typically takes to build before charges are formally filed. From that point forward, this case moved through the federal system the way major murder-for-hire prosecutions often do, slowly, with repeated delays, mounting discovery, and constant legal maneuvering from both sides. What makes this case particularly complicated is how it evolved over time through multiple superseding indictments, essentially, updated versions of the charges that prosecutors are allowed to file, as an investigation continues to develop. The first indictment laid out the core murder-for-hire allegations tied to the Los Angeles shooting. A second superseding indictment followed, making adjustments to specific allegations, including reportedly removing an earlier claim about how a co-defendant was said to have handled proceeds tied to the case, after a key witness's account reportedly shifted over time. Then came the third superseding indictment in June, which is the one that added the sweeping racketeering allegations at the center of this week's ruling. It's also worth understanding the broader legal environment this case is unfolding in. Thicker charges, violent crimes in aid of racketeering, and RICO-style prosecutions have become an increasingly common tool federal prosecutors use against artists and public figures connected to street-level conflicts, treating alleged criminal networks the way organized crime cases have traditionally been prosecuted. It's the same general legal framework that was used against Young Thug and his YSL co-defendants in Georgia, which is exactly why Durk's team brought in Brian Steele, an attorney who had direct experience defending against that kind of case, to help navigate this one. That connection matters, because RICO and Vicar prosecutions are built differently than a standard murder case. Instead of focusing narrowly on one incident, they allow prosecutors to introduce a much wider range of alleged conduct, other alleged crimes, associates, and patterns of behavior, all under the theory that it demonstrates an ongoing criminal enterprise. That's exactly why Durk's legal team fought so hard to keep the Chicago and Atlanta allegations out of the August 20th trial. Letting that broader pattern of conduct evidence into a jury's hands, alongside the original Los Angeles shooting, could shape how jurors view the entire case, even if the newer allegations were never fully proven on their own. There's also the matter of how much of Durk's own artistry has become part of the prosecution's evidence. Throughout this case, federal prosecutors have sought to introduce excerpts from Durk's songs and music videos as evidence under what's known as Rule 404(b), a rule governing when prior bad acts or related conduct can be introduced at trial. According to reporting, the government has repeatedly revised which songs and videos it intends to use, at points narrowing its list, and then later expanding it again, adding tracks that had never previously been flagged, as recently as weeks before trial. This is a recurring flashpoint in hip-hop prosecutions broadly, the question of whether a rapper's lyrics and visuals can fairly be used as evidence of real criminal intent, or whether that crosses a line into punishing artistic expression. All of that context is what makes this week's ruling such a significant moment. It's not just a procedural win. It's a judge drawing a hard line around how much of a rapper's broader life, associates, and alleged history can be dumped into a single trial versus what has to be proven on its own, in its own separate proceeding. Just when it looked like this ruling wrapped things up neatly, a few additional wrinkles make clear this fight is far from over. First, there's the matter of exactly how this severed racketeering trial will actually work going forward. Judge Fitzgerald's ruling means Durk will, at some point after the August 20th trial concludes, face an entirely separate proceeding specifically on the racketeering and Vicar counts tied to the alleged 2022 Chicago killing and the 2019 Atlanta shooting. No date has been set for that second trial, which means, even in the best-case scenario where Durk is fully cleared at the August 20th trial, his legal battle with the federal government isn't actually over. It just gets split into two fights instead of one. Second, there's the juror anonymity issue that surfaced in this same hearing. Prosecutors confirmed they intend to formally request that the 16 jurors selected for the August trial remain anonymous, citing security concerns. That's a serious detail. Anonymous juries are typically reserved for cases where prosecutors believe there's a genuine risk to jurors' safety, which underscores just how high stakes and closely watched this trial has become. Judge Fitzgerald has indicated a follow-up hearing will address exactly how that anonymity process will work in practice. Third, and this is a twist that complicates the clean win narrative, prosecutors haven't been sitting quietly since this ruling. Just days before Judge Fitzgerald's decision, reports indicate that when Durk's team initially tried to get the Chicago allegations separated, the government pushed back hard, specifically leaning on the newly finalized convictions in the Stephon Mack case. Two men had pleaded guilty in connection with that killing, and both admitted, as part of their plea deals, to attempting to collect a bounty from Durk for it. Prosecutors argue that evidence, a text message about waiting for Durk's return to Chicago, plus a recorded jailhouse confession, is directly relevant and only became available for use once those guilty pleas were locked in, which is part of why it entered the picture when it did rather than earlier in the case. That detail matters because it shows this isn't simply a story of prosecutors inventing charges out of nowhere at the last second. There's an argument, at least from the government side, that some of this evidence genuinely wasn't ready to use until recently. The judge's ruling didn't necessarily reject that argument outright. He ruled on fairness and timing for this specific trial, while leaving room for that evidence to still be used against Durk in the separate, forthcoming racketeering trial. There's also the matter of that alleged delete thread and start new one text message prosecutors have pointed to. If that message becomes a central piece of evidence in the eventual racketeering trial, it could become one of the more damaging pieces of the government's case regardless of how the original Los Angeles trial turns out. A reminder that this legal fight is really operating on two separate tracks moving forward, not one. And finally, there's the trial that's actually about to happen. August 20th, 2026 is now locked in as the date for the original Los Angeles murder-for-hire case, the one tied directly to the killing of Xavier Robinson. 16 jurors, likely anonymous, will hear a case that's been almost 2 years in the making, without the added complexity of the Chicago and Atlanta allegations clouding the proceedings. Durk's legal team gets the focused, faster trial they've been fighting for since day one. But it comes with the understanding that whatever happens in that courtroom, a second legal battle over the racketeering allegations is still waiting on the other side. Let's lay out exactly where this stands. Both sides, no spin. Lil Durk's legal team fought to keep a sprawling, last-minute racketeering indictment out of his upcoming murder-for-hire trial, arguing federal prosecutors dumped a terabyte of new evidence and two entirely separate alleged killings into the case just weeks before trial, threatening his constitutional right to a speedy resolution after nearly 2 years in custody. This week, a federal judge agreed, ruling that the new racketeering charges tied to alleged incidents in Chicago and Atlanta will be tried completely separately, letting the original Los Angeles case move forward as scheduled on August 20th. Federal prosecutors, for their part, maintain they remain fully prepared to go to trial as scheduled, and have argued that key pieces of the newer evidence, including guilty pleas secured in a related Chicago murder case, only became available to use recently, which is why they were introduced when they were rather than earlier. Both things are true at once. Durk got a real, documented legal win this week, and he still has an entire second trial waiting for him once this one wraps up, with life sentence level stakes attached to both. So here's what we want to know from you. Do you think the judge made the right call keeping these cases separate? Or do you think prosecutors should have been allowed to present the full picture to one jury? And bigger question, does this ruling tell you the original case against Durk was weaker than the government wants people to believe? Or was this purely about following the rules on timing and evidence? Let us know in the comments. We're reading every single one. If this breakdown helped you actually understand what's happening in this case, smash that like button. It genuinely puts this content in front of more people who need the real story instead of the rumors floating around online. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this trial starts August 20th, and we will be covering every single update as it happens. Comment below with your prediction for how this trial goes. We'll see you in the next one.